topic. Alan, why don't you lead the charge and let's talk about life insurance and life insurance trusts.
Okay, so under the federal estate tax law, if I die and leave my life insurance payable to Marcia, then
That's his wife, everyone,
that's my wife.
not the
Then,
girlfriend.
right. She has a different name. So then on Marcia's death, the estate tax will be imposed on whatever she did with the life insurance proceeds. Now, if I die first and my life insurance is payable to what we call a credit shelter trust, then it can fill up that trust. It can benefit Marcia for her lifetime, not be subject to estate tax when she dies, but it will have used up part of my exemption and will reduce what's called Marcia's portability allowance. So the third alternative, which is usually the better one for anyone estate taxable, is that the life insurance goes into an irrevocable life insurance trust, which we call an ILIT. Marcia can be the trustee of the trust. The trust is held for Marcia's lifetime health, education, maintenance, and support. The trust owns the life insurance policy. If I transfer an existing one into the trust, it has to be in there 3 years before I die, unless you sell it to the trust in a special way. And so when I die, it's not subject to estate tax. It doesn't use any of my portability allowance. And by the way, if I'm sued while I'm living, the creditor cannot touch the life insurance trust. Now, the transfer of money or the policy into the life insurance trust can use up part of my $17,000 per person annual exclusion or my exemption amount. So you look at that as well. But I think that's the brief explanation of what an ILIT is and why there are so many of them out there for very good reason.
Let me just amplify a couple points Alan said. First, insurance trusts, these irrevocable life insurance trusts, are one of the most common estate planning tools. And years ago, they were almost everybody had one because the estate tax exemptions were so much lower that the insurance policy alone would trigger a tax if you didn't have one. With the very high exemptions we have now, maybe there have been less used, but I kind of think that's a mistake because to me, and Alan kind of said it, I like the asset protection and the management of an insurance trust. If there's a young couple, they may go out and buy several $1,000,000 of insurance on each other just because it's inexpensive and they have kids and they want to make sure if something happens, there's money there to pay off the mortgage so that the surviving spouse, has some financial flexibility and so on. Usually the amounts involved in insurance policies are pretty large. I like protecting them from all the things that go bump in night, even if there's not an estate tax. So if anything, I think the high exemptions have lulled some people that should be creating trusts because it's not that big of a deal to do into not doing it. So they really are a very common tool. And part of the goal of this discussion was that I find that they're just not paid enough attention to, and they need to be paid attention to. So for example, the heart of an insurance trust is the insurance policy. I don't review policies. I don't know if you do, Alan, but I'm not an insurance expert, but I often, I always tell people that they should periodically, at least every 2-3 years, have the insurance policies reviewed. Sometimes your circumstances change. Sometimes you develop a health issue and you may be able to exercise an option to convert a term policy to permanent. Sometimes your needs change and you need more insurance coverage. You may have made a lot of money and it may be tied up in an illiquid business or real estate. So you may want to change the amount of coverage. Sometimes policies don't perform as anticipated. Sometimes companies fall on hard times. So it's very important to periodically have an insurance expert monitor the policy to make sure it suffices for your needs and that it's performing as you wish. And I'll tell you, so frequently, I'll have a client come back after 20 years of not being in my office. They haven't looked at the policy. They just keep paying the premiums and they assume they bought a policy, it must be fine. Not a safe assumption. Not a safe assumption. So get your policies reviewed. Get people like even young couples who don't have trust to look at it You have to, Alan, what about the trust? Should they be reviewed? The trust document, after all, it's irrevocable. Should we ever
The,
look at it?
they should absolutely be reviewed. Even if you don't like your life insurance trust, you could buy the policy back out or set up a new replacement life insurance policy, give it money or stock, and then it buys the policy from the old life insurance policy. And then the
Very common.
old life insurance trust. So you should definitely take a look at this thing and balance the rest of your estate plan against it. And the life insurance trust that I set up for Marcia gives her the ability under her last will and testament to redirect how it goes when she dies among our common descendants. And that's called a power of appointment. You want to make sure that that power of appointment is in that life insurance trust if that is consistent with your planning.
So one of the most common things I see, and I'm sure you see it frequently too, is trust done long ago very commonly paid out the assets to the kids once they were some age like 30, right? Because at 30 they should be mature enough to handle money. That is really not anywhere near ideal planning, because what if the kid gets divorced? What if the kid's imprudent? What if the kid gets sued? What do you do about that, Alan?
Well, you can reform that trust so that it benefits each child for their health, education, maintenance, and support for their lifetime. And then creditors can't reach in, divorcing spouses can't reach in. It's estate tax proof. If you do it right, you may have to, if you're converting an existing life insurance policy, you may have to sell the policy to a new one in the way I described. But your points are all really well taken, Marty. All of those things are really important to review. And when we see life insurance trusts, those issues happen time and time again.
All the
It's
time.
it's frustrating even for the lawyer to see the hard-earned monies and proceeds from life insurance go immediately down the toilet on the death of a client because they go directly to a drug addict or directly to a spendthrift or directly to a divorcing spouse or directly to a creditor. We see
Right.
that time and time again. So very inexpensive, relatively speaking, to get a life insurance trust or replace or change the life insurance trust you have.
What Alan just gave is a great advertisement or education as to why you want to use insurance trusts, even if you're not subject to estate tax. And I think that's a very common mistake now is, gee, my whole estate's only a couple million with the insurance. Why do I need to bother? Well, if you got a $2 million insurance policy, it's worth protecting. And you're buying it because you want to protect the people who are the beneficiaries. The trust is the way to do it. And we commonly see old trusts with all sorts of problems. Why are people waiting 20, 25 years to come back to address it? I think they don't understand that just because you did a trust years ago, that it may be able to be improved. Times have changed, drafting has changed, your circumstances may have changed. And by the way, if you're an insurance consultant or an accountant and you see a client that has an old trust, encourage them to address this, because it's really a huge benefit. It's often not that big of a deal to do. Slide 18, I can just say very quickly, what I find is very few people, and I'm saying this in the context of life insurance trusts, but it applies to all trusts, and probably most entities as well. Few people seem to have the records for a trust that they should have, even the trustees. You want to have organized the actual, an original of the trust if you have it, at least a PDF if you have electronic files, but you should have a complete signed copy of the trust. I can't tell you how many times when somebody comes to us, whether from another lawyer or whatever, and nobody has a complete copy of the trust that's been signed, or they have a complete signed copy, but it's missing 2 pages and no one can find it because it was done 30 years ago. Try to get this stuff organized now. The longer you wait, the harder it is to find old records. If when you did the trust, you had your attorney do a memo, put that in the file. If you had an accountant get you a tax ID number, put that in the file. The projections when the policy was first purchased, maybe some communications, correspondence from the insurance consultant, put that in the file. It may explain why the plan was done, what it is. It may explain some of the assumptions of the plan so that you can look at it and just common sense say, gee, these assumptions have changed. We need to revisit what our coverage is or the type of policy. So I encourage anyone that's involved with an insurance trust, or frankly any trust, but get all the documents together. Once you have an organized compilation of all the documents electronically, it's very easy to have it backed up. It's very easy to send copies to your other advisors and do that, because if your attorney, your accountant, your insurance consultant, your wealth advisor all have this simple electronic file, whoever you call to ask a question to has all the relevant information. And years from now, it's only going to be harder to find it.